Hello everyone, I am Becky. Welcome to Between World. Life experiences are not only about exploring business, but also about exploring life and human nature. Today, I'd like to discuss a topic that blends multiple dimensions. Compound interest, whether in personal life, business, corporate operations, team building, or managing relationships. I believe compound interest is the shortcut we all strive for in our long journey of life and work. We often see people around us achieve results that seem effortless. Yet what we may not realize is the journey and experiences behind those achievements. From another perspective, specifically how to live life with less effort. I believe there are underlying methods, logic, and principles at play. Today, I will explore this topic in depth from multiple perspectives. Let me start with a scenario I experienced today. In the past, when we were in China, we collaborated with many large European companies and would always do LC, which is letter of credit. In the past, we were quite proficient in the business model of credit card payment from Europe to China. This year, given the substantial project value in France, we adopted LC letter of credit as our transaction method with clients. With our headquarters in the Netherlands, the current business model involves Dutch and French companies conducting LC transactions. In fact, there have been significant changes in the entire process. Compared to within the EU, the process is not as cumbersome as cooperating with China, but there are also differences in terms. Since I was personally in charge of the sales side for this project, and given its substantial scale, I managed it from start to finish. Recently, we've just started processing this LC letter of credit. Tomorrow, I happen to be in France for a dedicated meeting regarding the issuance of a letter of credit, with the CEO and CFO of the client involved. Last week, I had already made preparations in advance. Today, I am completing all pre-meeting preparations. During this process, I have gained some experiences and received some inspirations. What is that experience? The experience is that in the past few years in China, I no longer had to handle such basic and detailed work, which was all taken care of by our financial director and our manager Alina. When I resumed this business process, I found myself in numerous similar scenarios, which brought me great relief and opportunities. Having handled all foundational tasks, I believe this experience allows a CEO to grasp the big picture, delegate the right tasks to the right people, and make informed decisions. Understanding frontline operations is crucial. Though a CEO may not always work on the front lines, they must stay attuned to real-world conditions. This helps evaluate whether assigned tasks and requirements are reasonable. I've worked across virtually all business scenarios. My familiarity with the processes made it easier to get back on track. Secondly, I accomplished 3 key tasks today. First, I streamlined the standard operating procedure SOP for issuing letters of credit within the EU. The guide details every step from drafting initial proposals with clients, finalizing drafts and bank confirmations to shipping, document submission, and payment collection, emphasizing critical details at each stage. This serves as the standardized LC for any future LC manager. Secondly, I developed a checklist, a tool I found highly effective. I documented and categorized all required details for each process step, then labeled them accordingly. Tomorrow, I can use this checklist to verify with clients. For each collected document, I check the boxes and schedule collection timelines for missing items. Once completed, the checklist proves remarkably clear and efficient. Finally, I compiled a client-ready version. The SOP mentioned earlier was internal, while this client version includes all timelines, required documentation, and key clauses from the LC template. When I organized these 3 documents, my first realization was that this was a learning process. I believe many share this experience. I believe many share this experience per yesterday's podcast about hands-on practice. Action stimulates our cognitive processes. During this process, I identified efficiency, reliability, and potential risks in details. However, without hands-on implementation, some risks might remain undetected. This is my personal experience. Personally, I approached it with curiosity. For our first European LC project, we could delegate to third-party financial partners, but no one understands this business better than me. As the client-facing representative, I wanted to personally operate it as a learning opportunity. Action always brings new knowledge. I also researched extensively online, including bank integration processes. The second key insight emerged during my organizational review. When future colleagues or external partners need to coordinate this process, there is no need for redundant implementation. The standardized operating procedure SOP can be easily replicated, which is why I included it in our shared document. This ensures timely visibility for all stakeholders, particularly future implementers. The records I've maintained have established a practical management framework for the company. Corporate operations involve numerous management processes and mechanisms, with each department having distinct workflow, stages requiring corresponding protocols. These protocols must clearly define timelines, responsible parties, implementation methods, and performance benchmarks. For further refinement, we could incorporate incentive and penalty mechanisms to enhance operational efficiency. In fact, when we were in China, we had already established some management mechanisms, but after coming to the Netherlands, the team localized from scratch with all Dutch colleagues, and now there are also some colleagues from other countries. I realized as early as 2025 that this was very important for us. As I mentioned before, corporate operational records are our most valuable assets because they are sustainable, continuously optimized, and can be organized. Extracting logic and patterns allows future teams or our localized teams re-established in other countries to continuously replicate them. I previously mentioned a topic that we might delve into in the next issue. The premise of globalization is localization. Only by establishing sustainable development mechanisms through localization can we continuously replicate when expanding into new countries and markets. In 2026, I will establish a set of corporate management mechanisms and effective processes as a very important task for me as CEO. And this year, I have already listed it as the first item in the first column of my task list. From a time perspective, I am currently planning for 3 to 5 years. What results do we want to achieve in 3 to 5 years? What scale of team do we want to build? Looking back, what foundation do we need today to make what we want to achieve in 3 to 5 years replicable and more effectively happen? Here, I will elaborate on replication through scenarios. If we only solve immediate problems, treating symptoms rather than root causes, addressing only current issues, then it will be linear development. What is compound interest? Compound interest refers to exponential and continuously upward development. In the early stages, it may appear slow and flat, but later it can rise straight or grow exponentially and explosively, building an effective management mechanism at the enterprise level. From a long-term perspective, is a matter of compound interest. It seems easier and easier, but the results get better and better. The second point I think is compoundable is building a team. From my 10 years of entrepreneurial experience, when I was in China, I spent a lot of energy and time on building a team. And of course, we also spent some money, but actually, money is the easiest. On the contrary, my personal experience is that cultivating a team requires more energy and cost. At that time, I also received some doubts from friends around me, asking why I spent so much energy on cultivating a team. Behind the cultivation lies another implicit and very important key factor, which I believe is selecting people. Choosing and screening people is very important. Only on the basis of screening and selection can cultivation have room or value. Otherwise, it is just blindly cultivating, which I personally think is inefficient. Therefore, screening talents and building a mechanism for cultivating a team. My experience is that this is a matter of heavy investment in the early stage, but low returns in the later stage. In the early days when I led a team, I invested a lot of energy. It might have been more energy investment than the current guidance scope, but if we stretch the timeline to 7 to 8 years and consider the time spent collaborating with many colleagues, the energy invested later becomes less and less. But the team feedback becomes more and more. One very important thing here is mutual trust, whether with partners, clients, or colleagues. The most important thing in human cooperation is mutual trust. Building mutual trust requires time and effort. When you choose people with aligned values and invest in establishing a solid foundation, your team's growth trajectory and feedback will naturally improve. As a CEO, I've always felt fortunate in fostering teamwork and trust, receiving mostly positive feedback, even during the major crises and challenges I faced in recent years. It would have been impossible to navigate them without my team members' unwavering belief, persistent efforts, and full commitment. This is what I've learned about team building, and it is a positive outcome. The years we have been operating and the time since our startup are actually not long. Looking back over a 78-year timeline, my personal experience is that building a team and cultivating an excellent team is indeed a matter of significant upfront investment, but substantial returns later on, especially in terms of the inheritance and influence of corporate culture. I believe the role it plays exceeds expectations. When I worked in China, I had 3 or 4 colleagues, and we worked together for 7 to 8 years. Later, I moved to Europe and lived in the Netherlands for 2 to 3 years, seeing them only once or twice a year. I can say that with several colleagues, I could get timely responses within 24 hours at any time. This is not about making everyone work overtime or finding work for them. What I want to express is that responses can be obtained at any time, which makes me realize how important it is for a seamless team and a strong foundation of trust to collaborate and work together. It helps us overcome difficulties and challenges and find solutions together. It ensures that when facing greater external challenges, we won't become more internally divided due to complaints and distrust over the 10 years of entrepreneurship. To date, I've spent over 95% of my time in team management without significant challenges. Having been a beneficiary of this experience, I've learned through reviewing our brief team building journey that team development requires substantial upfront investment, but yields substantial returns. The longer a company operates, the more pronounced the benefits and outcomes. For us, 2026 is a pivotal year for establishing and building teams, which I prioritize on my to-do list. Lastly, I want to emphasize the importance of relationships. For instance, our relationships with teams and partners, as well as with clients and business partners, are all part of this dynamic. If we consider them purely from a commercial perspective, if we envision cultivating certain partners and can foresee the next 10 to 20 years, then looking back at today, who would we choose to collaborate with? What qualities do they possess? What characteristics and factors will help us identify these clients, partners, and networks for future collaboration over the next 10 to 20 years? This is what requires our dedicated efforts in management and maintenance. Conversely, if we fail to recognize it, we may miss opportunities to collaborate with certain individuals. Without any collaboration prospects in the next 10 to 20 years, the time and effort we invest in them today would be merely linear and short-term. Our future development and relationship development will also be linear. In addition to the individual consciousness in the business environment, I am also one. One could be described as a person nurtured by relationships. On one hand, family members possess unique familial attributes. We refer to friends. Friends, partners, and clients are roles that dynamically shift and overlap. Sometimes even clients become our friends. Friends may also serve as our partners, thus they are not entirely separate entities. Personally, I am someone nurtured by relationships, with approximately 10 individuals around me. There are usually around 12 to 13 people, and the number increases after arriving in the Netherlands, allowing for in-depth exchanges. The foundation of profound communication lies in mutual trust. This deep connection is embodied in a specific behavioral pattern, the back-to-back relationship. This will significantly reduce communication costs. In terms of relationships, my current experience is that transparent communication builds mutual trust. It is a crucial mindset that simplifies relationships while elevating their quality a conscious choice. In my personal relationships, I prioritize transparency and honesty. When I make mistakes, I sincerely apologize, sharing my struggles and challenges. Yet, the feedback I receive is always positive, and I often feel deeply grateful. Human nature is multifaceted. It is natural to value self-interest. But when we first show kindness and receive reciprocal goodwill, the results are consistently rewarding. Every day is filled with gratitude. When I sense mutual willingness to share transparent and honest aspects of our relationships, or those precious emotional connections, I feel that 1 + 1 = 2, where both parties are nourished. 10 years ago, when I started my business, I traveled alone to the US with no acquaintances. 9 years ago, I came to Europe. 3 years ago, I arrived in the Netherlands alone. Throughout this journey, I received tremendous support from many people. These are the relationships I mentioned earlier. They are mixed and intertwined, encompassing our partners, clients, friends, and colleagues. It is precisely through mutual assistance and the nourishment derived from these relationships that we find it easier to confront and manage numerous challenges and difficulties. That may seem daunting, particularly in relationships. I have observed that the longer the duration, the more crucial the selection and screening process becomes. This principle applies equally to talent acquisition and team building. These constitute the foundational elements. Many of my acquaintances maintain relationships lasting over a decade, which demonstrates remarkably low communication costs and a robust trust foundation. As these layers of trust build up and communication costs decrease, it will help us communicate more effectively and tackle challenges with greater ease. This forms a positive feedback loop. While the longer the duration, the more we perceive it as a stroke of luck. I believe it actually stems from the benefits of nurturing relationships. Today, I will explore how to make our long lives work in a way that generates continuous compounding effects through corporate operations, building management systems, team development, and cultivating professional networks. Since I am still on the journey, whether in business or personal growth, I plan to keep exploring and sharing insights about compound interest. I am also eager to hear more from you. If you've had similar stories, experiences, or thoughts that inspired you, I'd be truly grateful. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll keep bringing you more content like this. Wishing you all a wonderful day. I am Becky. Thank you for tuning in. See you next time.